It's really hard to record one of these videos without swearing at the beginning of it. When a story like this comes through, I'm going to do my best to keep it professional, but suffice it to say, Sony really screwed the pooch with this one. They purchased Bungie just last year in 2022 for $3.6 billion dollars with a B, billion dollars. That is 1,000 millions three times and then point 0.6. It's a lot of money that they paid for Bungie. And they just did the cheapest move, the worst move right before the holidays. This is the ultimate Scrooged move I think I've seen in years. I mean, I'm racking my brains. I'm sure there's been worse, but this one, it takes the cake. JT. Here we go again, embroiled in yet another controversy surrounding employees in the video game industry. Once again, betrayed by Bungie, employees were let go that were promised shares being vested in this company after Sony purchased them. If they stayed on for a long enough period of time, they would make money from those vested shares, unless they left. Or unless they got fired. I don't know. And here's another one. How about it's October 31st. These people will let go October 30th with their benefits expiring at the end of the month. That's what Bungie just did to 100 employees from there, reported from Jason Schreier and Bloomberg. They were already living under uncertain times. A lot of these employees weren't sure how much longer they were going to be there for. They were recently informed that Destiny 2 was not really retaining the players as they expected it to, and they didn't really have anything coming down the pipe for them, so they had to cut costs. But I keep going back to this whole upper echelon CEO and investor level stuff where billions of dollars is involved in a purchase where Bungie was doing just fine on their own. And then Sony comes in and swoops them up under their umbrella, purchases them. Not so different than with Naughty Dog, who also recently had layoffs. Sony, I don't know what the hell's going on corporately, but they are letting go of a lot of people right now. And this is what happens when a company gets brought under the umbrella of a larger company. Doesn't matter how good that company was doing on their own, when they get purchased by a larger company, everything that was happening there now goes under a bigger umbrella and someone else starts making the decisions. According to the report by Bloomberg, Bungie's workforce was cut by 8%, approximately 100 staff members, after a meeting where they were warned of underperforming revenue streams. The shortfall was primarily blamed on the poor player retention for Destiny 2, and the layoffs were carried out on October 30th, conveniently timing them so that the employee benefits lasted just a single day. How humane of Sony to be so caring, to give these employees a full 1 day of benefits, to gather all their things and get their ass out the door. I know it's uncertain times right now. I know it's a challenging environment for a lot of companies, but pulling a move like this would make me never want to even think of applying to a company like Bungie, and long term could doom them from getting any possible good talent ever working for them again. And I'm not even blaming Bungie for this. It's coming from Sony. This is the kind of stuff that happens that destroys game studios. But here's what made me want to make this video. This is the biggest issue with all of it. Sony had acquired Bungie for $3.6 billion, allocating around $1.2 billion for employee retention. They promised shares as an incentive to keep talented employees on board. These shares were unvested, meaning they could only be accessed if the employees stayed for a certain number of years. However, those shares reverted to Bungie if you left, or, as it turns out, were unceremoniously shown the door. Here's your box. Get the hell out before we have to pay you these shares. What happened at Bungie isn't an isolated event. Earlier this month, Naughty Dog, who, like I said, also parent company Sony, also cut contracts short for dozens of workers. Media Molecule also had to lay off staff, and these just scratch the surface for people being let go in the video game industry at large in 2023. CEOs and executives constantly reiterate how they're all one big family, but these kind of actions show a starkly different narrative. It's all about business, profits over people, numbers over well-being, and frankly, it's exhausting. It's gross. They care more about the shareholders than they do about the people producing the product that they're selling to make the money in the first place. And maybe this is a bigger problem than Sony, and maybe it's a bigger problem than the video game industry at large. But for this instance in particular, I can't help but get off of that fact that they let employees go before they were able to vest their shares, meaning they lost out on a potential windfall of earnings because they were cut short before they were fully vested by no choice of their own. Now, I'd understand if vested shares reverted back to Bungie and Sony if they left on their own, because this was all about employee retention. But these people were let go. They were laid off. They wanted to stay on, if nothing else, to get those to vest fully and make the money from them, and they weren't allowed to stay. And that right there is the biggest issue I have. They were promised something and it got pulled like a rug underneath them. I don't know what to say. It's once again the video game industry striking the little guy while the people up top make all the money. And as far as my personal experience with Sony, specifically, I worked at Sony Online Entertainment, which was a division of Sony way back in the day that got spun off and no longer even exists right now. But when I was there, I kind of felt like the writing was on the wall for that division. I felt like a lot of poor decisions were being made, and I didn't have a choice or say in any of the matters. So ultimately, the choice I had was, do I stay and work here, or do I leave to find a different position somewhere else that's a little bit more stable? And ultimately, I went with going towards being a recruiter in the video game industry and getting out of working specifically for Sony so that I felt like I had a little bit more security underneath me when I went into work to get my paycheck every day. But not everyone has that ability, that choice. Some people are really dedicated to their craft, dedicated to the work, putting unimaginable amounts of time and effort and work into their job every day and get shown the door at the end of it anyways. And that's really disheartening. And my heart goes out to every single one of these about 100 people that were affected from Bungie specifically, but Naughty Dog and the other divisions that had this affect them as well. The video game industry is undergoing some sort of maturity cycle right now where it's conglomerates buying and eating up other companies and destroying what worked and what didn't work. And I don't know where this is going to bring us in the long term, but I do know it's a pretty crappy result in the short term. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, you stay smashing. Smash, change,